Hello there guys, Hirosaki here. This story is all about what if Naruto had the ability to be invisible. An accident bestows a completely new Kekkai Genkai on an orphan boy, a blood limit that nobody could have foreseen. Please like and subscribe to this channel before we begin, and check the description box for the author of this great storyline. Welcome aboard. Prologue. Some people claim that fate controls everything. There are many sayings supporting this view. Sayings like you can't fight fate or fate always wins. For those who look at life that way, prophecy is an echo of fate, a signpost showing what must be. Others claim that chance rules over all. That chance is constantly interfering, that a single flap of a butterfly's wing can cause a hurricane half a world away, that how a single leaf falls can change the universe. Prophecy for them is sign of what might be, depending on how it is looked at. Both claims are true, and both are false. The very nature of the multiverse explains why memories blur. It doesn't matter if one steps to the left of a stone or to the right. If one catches a ball or drops it has almost no effect on the greater path of things. They are simply localized ripples in the river of reality, slight signs that people are switching between universes where the only difference is where they put the car keys the previous evening. Occasionally though, a choice is made that does affect the river of realities. An event occurs that diverts the flow, that changes the future for that particular substream of realities. This is known as a divergence. There can be many such divergences. A boy gains a scar on his forehead in accordance with a prophecy. But what if the scar took away his sight? What if the infant wandered away from the doorstep he was left on and got taken in by a woman who would come to care for him? What if an assassin returning from a mission took him and introduced him to her friends, one of whom was a god? What if he was taken in by those related to him, but managed to turn himself into a magical cat a few years later? The divergences are endless and go different routes with different endings. But then what is the divergence here? What is the event that caused the river of reality to settle into a different bed of events? The answer lies in a dark and stormy night. Well, a mid-afternoon, actually. But I always wanted to say the above. In another universe, the Genin practicing the chameleon jutsu that his sensei gave him would still have noticed the young boy spying on him, copying his actions. The Genin, in his anger at being watched, would have chased the boy until he was stopped by a member of the ANBU. He would have been interrogated and cleared of everything except hot-headedness, a lesson he would take to heart. He would learn meditation, self-control, and would pass his first Chunin exam with flying colors. And when he saw the boy again at the boys' Chunin exams, he would fail to recognize him, but he would protect the boy as he left the arena after his friend, preventing a sound nin from throwing a poison kunai at him. Eventually he would make Jonin, get married and have children, living out his days happily and training a new team, imbuing them with the art of self-control. But that was in another universe. Arg. Only the legs this time. Naruto looked up from the piece of food he had found at an abandoned training campsite. Although burned and then slightly dampened by the light drizzle, it was still edible, especially since he hadn't had more than a few scraps to eat in the 3 days that he had been thrown out of the orphanage on his 5th birthday. Making a decision, Naruto stuffed the rest of the food into his mouth and crawled into the underbrush, his overly large jacket, that he had liberated from the orphanage's wash line after the matron had literally kicked him out during the night in just his underwear, brushing against the ground as he crept barefoot through the twigs. Reaching a position where he could peer out through the narrow gap between 2 trees, he paused long enough to retie one of the strings that held his oversized trousers in place, trousers that had come from the same line as his jacket. What he saw was almost unbelievable, a boy a bit more than twice his age, with only his upper body visible. Naruto stared as the boy's legs faded back into view, then the boy began a sequence of hand seals, carefully forming each one as he did so. Naruto watched, his wide eyes taking in every finger twitch that the older boy made. Totan no Jutsu. The boy faded from view and Naruto gasped. "Who's there?" The boy flickered back into view and his hand blurred, sending a trio of shurikens slicing through the undergrowth. Naruto flinched and scrambled away as fast as he could. As he did so, a kunai sliced past his head, missing him by barely a finger width before bouncing off a tree and landing on the ground. Never one to pass up free tools, Naruto grabbed the kunai as he dodged round another tree. Then an idea occurred to him. Maybe if he could vanish, the boy chasing him would leave him alone. Biting on the handle of the kunai, Naruto began the hand seals, unknowingly channeling chakra and a hint of yukai as he did so. The term 1,000,000 to 1 chance is often used to describe things that happen despite all the apparent factors that should have prevented it. When one sits down and actually calculates things, the odds are usually far greater. One small boy managing to correctly copy the hand seals for a jutsu created by a sannin and learned by several shinobi who specialized in infiltration and stealth. 250 to 1. The boy actually being near a training field where said jutsu was being learned by a genin whose jonin sensei had left with the other 2 genin for lunch. 25,000 to 1. A genin accidentally throwing the only chakra-conductive kunai he had in his fully stocked kunai pouch. 20 to 1. A 5-year-old channeling chakra a full 2 years before he could reasonably be expected to. 100 to 1. Unknowingly containing the most powerful demon in existence and utilizing its power by accident. 20 million to 1. A bolt of lightning hitting a person. 5,000 to 1. Cancel the previous. A bolt of lightning hitting a person without killing them at the exact instant that they were releasing a jutsu. 2,750,000,000 to 1. The total odds of such a sequence of events happening. 687 septillion 500 sextillion to 1. Compared to that, 1,000,000 to 1 chance is a dead certainty. But Uzumaki Naruto, in every single universe he existed in, was known to live without being affected by the odds. If something was considered impossible, he could generally do it. He could learn the Rasengan in a month, then complete it when the Yondaime Hokage had given up on it. He could overcome an inability to replenish his sage chakra by using Kage Bunshin to do it for him. And he could survive being hit by lightning. Although the interaction between the lightning, the jutsu, his healing ability, his chakra nature, wind, and the suddenly shocked awake Kyuubi inside him produced something that no one could have foreseen. The genin sat against the wall in the Hokage's office, his wide eyes staring at nothing visible to the rest of his team. Then he ran and I tried to, and lightning, gone. Hiruzen stared at the genin, then at the jonin who shrugged. I have no idea, Hokage-sama. We came back from our lunch and found him like this. I would like to ask for permission for Yamanaka Inoichi, or one of his clans to use their skills to find out what happened to cause this. I agree. Hiruzen said. It may be important. Take him to the Yamanaka compound, and report back once the situation has clarified itself. Hi, Hokage-sama. Yerf. What hit me? Naruto slowly sat up and rubbed at his eyes, looking round. For several moments, the mental fog prevented his mind from recognizing the situation, but eventually, several important facts percolated through. He could see. But his eyes were closed. He could see. But he couldn't see his hands. He could see. But he couldn't see any part of himself. As the facts registered, Naruto inhaled sharply, then he screamed. Afterwards, Naruto would be hard-pressed to reconstruct the events of his first afternoon of invisibility. The first half hour or so passed in a panicked haze, as he ran around trying to find evidence that he actually existed. Eventually, he decided that the bruises that he had accumulated by running into trees probably counted towards him still being alive, and he sat down just as 2 masked figures landed. So, this is where the demon brat was killed. One of them said with a satisfied tone of voice. It seems like Susanoo had the right idea yesterday. I think I'll switch to worshipping the storm god for killing the Uzumaki Gaki. Naruto froze. He didn't know who or what Susanoo was, but having the masked figures talk about him like that. The work of the 4th has been completed. said the second in a tone of deep satisfaction. He sealed the Kyuubi, turning it into a baby, and now that kid is finally dead. Naruto's eyes widened and he felt his insides congeal. Was that why everyone hated him? Was he really the Kyuubi, the monster that had attacked Konoha 5 years ago? With a heavy heart, Naruto rose and set off towards the Hokage Tower. Maybe the old man who occasionally visited him could provide answers. As he walked, Naruto became aware that no one was glaring at him or making signs to ward off evil. In fact, no one was looking at him at all. After the third time that he had to leap out of the way of someone striding along, Naruto tucked in behind a team walking towards the tower, using them to shield himself from being knocked over by those who didn't know that he was there. Hey! Did you hear the news? The man leading the team paused, his students and Naruto, coming to a stop as another ninja jogged up. What news? The Uzumaki kid's dead. He was hit by a lightning bolt and turned into vapor. He's gone, and so is that damned demon he was carrying. Naruto blinked. The demon he was carrying? But wasn't he the demon? That isn't good. The team leader said after a few seconds of thought. It means that we've lost our Jinchuriki. We're now the only one of the Great Five without a demon container. That puts us at a disadvantage. Naruto frowned. Demon container? Did that truly mean that he wasn't the Kyuubi after all? But with the Kyuubi gone forever, we are the village that destroyed not just a Biju, but the strongest Biju. The new ninja smirked. No one will dare use theirs against us in case we destroy theirs as well. The Sandaime is going to make a speech about it tomorrow morning from the roof to explain everything. Then I shall hold off on tomorrow's mission, said the team leader. Thank you, Aniki. No probs, big bro. Naruto sneaked off, sliding past the Chunin guarding the entrance to the tower. Running silently up the stairs, he soon reached the roof. Walking to the edge, he looked out at the sprawling town. Then he sighed and moved to shelter from the afternoon sun under one of the curved panels extending upwards from the edge of the roof terrace. Closing his eyes, he muttered a curse as he discovered once again that he could still see perfectly with his eyes closed. How was he supposed to sleep if he couldn't even block out the light? People of Konohagakure. Naruto jolted out of his light doze as Sarutobi Hiruzen's voice echoed, magnified by the seals set into the rising pillars. People of Konohagakure, the day before yesterday saw the death of Uzumaki Naruto. A huge cheer rose from the gathered crowd and Naruto's eyes filled with tears at the proof that he was hated so much. Hiruzen frowned and motioned for silence, a silence that was a long time in coming. As I was saying, the day before yesterday saw the death of Uzumaki Naruto, and as such, it is time that you knew the truth about him. Naruto was born of the 10th of October, the day that the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked Konoha. As most of you know, the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, sealed the Kyuubi into the boy at the cost of his own life. That much you all know, but it is nowhere near the whole truth. Both of Naruto's parents died on the day of his birth, giving their lives to seal away the Kyuubi. His mother was Uzumaki Kushina, the red-headed Habanaro and Kenjutsu mistress, as well as the second Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. The crowd erupted in gasps, shouted questions and screamed denials, and Hiruzen again motioned for silence. The first Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi was Senju Mito, born Uzumaki Mito, and the wife of the first Hokage, a kunoichi who bound the Kyuubi into herself when it was being controlled by Uchiha Madara at the Valley of the End. When she was dying, she transferred her burden to her niece Kushina, who had come here from Yazushi Ogakure to do so. The fact that Kushina held the Kyuubi was not well known, at her request, but by holding it, she protected Konohagakure in a manner deserving of respect and admiration, for only an Uzumaki can hope to contain the Kyuubi without dying. During her time as a kunoichi, Kushina met and fell in love with another shinobi. They often fought side by side and she eventually married him in a secret ceremony. Soon after, she became pregnant with his child. A problem that female Jinchuriki have is that when they give birth, the seal that holds the Biju weakens, meaning that it is possible for the Biju to escape. To keep Kanehagakure safe should such a thing happen, Kushina, her husband, and my wife secretly traveled to a cave for Kushina to give birth there, a cave that only they knew the location of. Or so they thought. The entire city was silent, the population barely breathing as the previously unknown story unfolded. As she was giving birth, they were attacked by an unknown person. My wife was killed trying to protect them, and the Kyuubi was ripped from Kushina, mortally wounding her in the process. The person then unleashed the Kyuubi against Konoha, a night that we all remember only too well. It was the Yondaime who saved us, but he did not do so alone. He managed to return the Kyuubi to the cave, where he and the dying Kushina worked together to seal the Kyuubi once more, this time into her son. Using a seal that cost him his life, Minato finished the sealing, then he and Kushina died in each other's arms from the wounds they had taken. They died, and their son, Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, lived. For almost a full minute, it didn't sink in, then a wave of shouts, curses and protests rose into the air. Once again, Hiruzen motioned for silence, but this time, it was a long time coming. When the crowd had finally quietened down, Hiruzen spoke again. The last wish of Minato was that his son would be seen as a hero. This morning, I fulfilled that wish when I engraved his name on the memorial stone. In his death, he took the Kyuubi with him. He was not the Kyuubi, he was its prison and its jailer, only a fool or a moron would believe otherwise. And with him gone, so too goes any chance of the Namikaze legacy being revived. The Namikaze mansion, hidden behind the time-space seals, can only be opened by one of Namikaze blood, and there are none now that Naruto is gone. The Rasengan and the Hiraishin are now no more, the scrolls containing them forever concealed in the Namikaze library. I have no doubt that our enemies shall rejoice at our misfortune. I can hope only that when he died, Naruto truly took the Kyuubi with him, for if he did not, the Kyuubi shall return, for it is almost impossible to permanently kill a Biju, since they reform within 10 years of their deaths, and we no longer have an Uzumaki available to contain it for us. I hope you are proud of yourselves, and of the hatred you had for the one who saved us. With that final snarled comment, accompanied by a blast of killing intent that almost caused Naruto to empty his bladder, Hiruzen stalked off, vanishing back into the tower. As the other adults followed him, talking amongst themselves in low voices, Naruto stayed motionless, thinking about what he had learned. His father was the 4th Hokage. His mother had been a famous ninja. He was the reason his parents had died, and everyone thought that he was dead. Him and the Kyuubi inside him. The sun sank as Naruto thought about what he had learned. As it touched the horizon, Naruto nodded to himself. They think I'm dead, so I am. I'm going to be a ghost. I can't be Uzumaki Naruto anymore, I'm Yurei, a spirit. I'll stay as Naruto, but now, I'm Yurei Naruto, the spirit of the maelstrom. Chapter 1. For most of Konoha, it was a bright and pleasant day. The demon brat had died a month prior, causing quite a few celebrations, followed very soon after by several mass admissions to the hospital, as those who saw the lineage of the Jinchuriki as being more important than his burden disagreed with those who hadn't bothered to understand the difference between something that is sealed and what it is sealed in. It was probably worth noting that almost all the hospital admissions were people in the latter category, with a very large majority of them being non-ninja. Although the injuries were generally not permanently crippling, they tended to be very painful and slow to heal, often leaving scars. Oddly, most of the victims received spiraling scars on their lower abdomens, scars suspiciously similar to the seal that had once been used to restrain the Kyuubi. After the fuss had died down to a low simmer, Konoha entered a new phase. With the loss of its greatest weapon, the Hokage decided to reorganize his ninja to compensate. Within 2 weeks of Naruto's apparent demise, the first non-Uchiha military police had been recruited from the Hyuga, Aburame and Inazuka clans, while almost half of the Uchiha ninjas of Chunin level and above had been reassigned to the active shinobi ranks, with a specific code of conduct being enforced regarding the use of their Sharingan within Konoha itself, although this was balanced by the payment of bounties for jutsu copied from the ninja of other nations, and placed into a new archive for any ninja to learn from. This was only the first, and the most obvious of the changes. Hinata tried to back up further, but the tree behind her prevented her retreat as the three girls loomed before her. It wasn't fair. She was only almost 6, what had she done to annoy them like that? Why couldn't they leave her alone? All she wanted was someone to be friends with, not to be hit for something that she didn't even have anything to do with. The leader of the trio, a girl named Ami, smirked as she slowly swung the stick that she was holding, a stick which she had snapped so that the end was sharp and jagged. Why are you doing this? Hinata begged, and Ami's face twisted into a wicked grin. Because you are a Hyuga, so high and mighty. Well, we'll show you that you don't need to be in a clan to be strong. Hinata crouched, curling her arms to protect her face, then she heard a loud slap. Who did that? I didn't see anyone, Ami. Well, someone hit me. Ami snarled, looking round, then her gaze snapped back to her confused victim. I bet it was you, we all know you Hyuga do weird things. Hinata shook her head. She had no idea what was going on, but... Slap. Ami leapt into the air with a scream, grabbing her butt. Her two friends stared at her in shock. Slap. Slap. Hinata managed not to giggle as the other two girls suddenly reacted, grabbing at their own butts. Hide. Hinata blinked as the young voice whispered into her ear, then she nodded and quickly slipped behind the tree that the trio had backed her against. Keeping her back to the tree, Hinata wished that she had managed to activate her Byakugan so that she could see what was happening on the other side of the tree, where the three girls were standing back to back in. Hinata blinked in shock. She could see them, even though the tree was between her and them. The colors had faded and she could see the glow of chakra. She had activated her Byakugan. Managing not to shout with joy, Hinata concentrated on what was happening. Her Byakugan was only letting her see about 20 meters, but it was more than enough to let her watch the bullies. Slap. Ami's head jerked round, he cheek reddening with the invisible impact, then another slap sounded, and the girl with the large hairstyle started to cry. The third girl raised her hands to cover her face, only for something to grab her hair and pull, causing her to stumble to her knees. Who's doing this? Ami screamed and Hinata gasped as the voice that had told her to hide spoke. I am Yuri and I was bullied while I lived. Now all who pick on others shall feel my pain. Ami's nerve broke and she fled, her face fixed in a rictus of fear, her two friends running after her, leaving liquid evidence of their presence. Swallowing, Hinata stepped back round the tree, her Byakugan fading as she did so. Why, Yuri-sama? Are you still here? Although the voice didn't answer, Hinata could almost feel invisible eyes looking at her. Gathering her courage, she bowed deeply. My name is Hyuga Hinata. Thank you for saving me. For a moment there was only silence, then the voice whispered a name. Yuri Ruto? Hinata repeated. Thank you, Ruto-sama. You are not scared of me. The voice whispered and Hinata smiled. You saved me. Why should I be scared? Hinata almost jumped as an invisible hand took her own, then she reached down with her free hand to stroke its fingers. Moving her hand, she traced a path up Yuri's arm, feeling a worn, loose sleeve over his bony limb, then up to his shoulder, his neck, and finally she stopped with her hand cupping the side of his face. Although she couldn't see him, she stared into the space where his eyes would be and smiled. Hinata-sama. Hinata jumped at the call and dropped her hands, realizing just too late that in doing so, she no longer knew where her savior was. Hinata-sama, it is time for you to return to the clan compound. Your mother wishes for you to meet your new sister. Hinata gasped with joy. She had known that her mother was due to give birth, and now she had a sister. Coming. She shouted, then she looked round, realizing even as she did so that it was probably a totally pointless action. Ruto-sama, will you come with me? Please? For a moment, there was no response and Hinata blinked away the tears that threatened to fill her eyes. All right. Hinata smiled as she felt a hand slide into her own. She's so small. Hinata said in astonishment, gazing at her new sibling. Hitomi giggled tiredly. She will grow, Hinata. She will grow. Indeed, she will. Said another voice, and Hinata looked up to see her father smiling down at them. I think we should tell our daughter the name of her new sister, don't you? Her name is Hanabi. Hitomi replied, looking down at her newest daughter. An excellent name. Hayashi said, gently reaching out to run a finger down the cheek of his youngest child. Hinata, come and say hello to your sister. Hinata moved forwards and smiled as Hanabi briefly opened her eyes. Hello, Hanabi. I'm your Nasan, Hinata. Hinata closed the door to her room. Grateful for the privacy seals in the walls, she pulled out a box of food that she had liberated from the kitchens under the pretense of getting a bedtime snack. Roto-kun? Are you here? Yes. Hinata breathed a sigh of relief and held out the box. Here, I brought you some food. If you want water, help yourself. As she spoke, Hinata glanced at the small jug of water on her bedside table, and she hid a smile as she saw that the level had already dropped somewhat. A moment later, the box seemed to float out of her hands and into the corner, where it sank until it was only a little above the ground, at almost the same height as it would have been had Hinata balanced it on her lap. The top lifted off and was placed on the floor, then an invisible hand picked up the first onigiri. Itadakimasu. Ruto's voice said, and then part of the onigiri vanished. Hinata watched almost entranced as the food vanished into an invisible mouth, bite by bite. Soon, the box was empty and it floated back into her hands. Hinata placed it on her desk and then bumped into Ruto, grabbing him to keep her balance. Oh, sorry. It's okay. Hinata smiled, then a thought occurred to her. Where was Ruto going to sleep? There was, after all, only one bed in her room. One bed. Ruto, what do you sleep in? Do you have pajamas? No, I wear my boxers. Hinata nodded and used her hand on his shoulder to lead Ruto to the bed. You're sleeping here tonight, okay? Sure. Ruto shrugged. Hiruzen stared at the square of fabric that had been placed on his desk. What am I supposed to be looking at? Chunin Ebisu adjusted his small sunglasses before replying. Hokage-sama, I was training when I stepped on this. What caught my attention was that although I could feel it, I couldn't see it. Please examine this for yourself. Sarutobi frowned, then carefully reached for the center of the fabric. His questing fingers encountered a length of fabric-wrapped metal, and his eyebrows shot up. Is this a kunai? Ebisu replied. As far as I can tell, it is a chakra-conductive kunai which somehow is invisible. I cannot explain it. Hiruzen nodded absently as he closed his eyes and extended his other senses. The way that the kunai channeled the chakra was familiar, the way that the metal was folded so that the outer surface had none of the ripples of the more common mass-produced kunai, the tensile strength of the blade, the etching on the inside of the pommel ring. This is a Higurushi special kunai. Hiruzen finally said, opening his eyes again to look at how his hand appeared to be empty even though he was gripping the handle firmly. Holding out his hand, he placed the kunai in Ebisu's hand. I know that you are very well read, see if you can decode the etchings. Ebisu blinked, then carefully ran his fingers round the inside of the ring. 8. 16. 3. I have a kunai from the same batch as this one. But that means that someone has managed to create a process that turns things invisible, but lost the kunai that it was used on. Hiruzen replied soberly. Take the kunai to Higurushi tomorrow, and let him examine it. Since he made it, he may be able to work out what was done to change it. As you command, Hokage-sama. Ebisu bowed, then he vanished in a shunshin. Hinata-sama? Are you awake? A voice called in through the door. You asked to be woken early today. Hinata opened her eyes and yawned with a smile, pausing as she realized that her arm was trapped under Uriai's body. I'm awake, give me a minute. she called out, pulling gently to extract her arm without waking her savior up. Her efforts proved unnecessary when Ruto sat up and yawned. "Good morning," Hinata whispered, praying that Ruto would take the hint and keep quiet. Her prayers were answered when Ruto hugged her and whispered, "Good morning, Hina-sama." "You can call me Hina-chan, Ruto-san," Hinata whispered back, returning his hug. Then she released him and moved to her wardrobe, pulling out a towel. "Ruto," she whispered, "you need to wash too, and the bathhouse is normally deserted at this time. If you leave your clothes in the corner so you can find them afterwards, it'll be quiet later, and you can wash your clothes then." A rustling of fabric was her answer, and Hinata blushed at the thought that Ruto was naked. "Come on," she whispered as Ruto took her hand, and she shifted his grasp to her shoulder as she opened her door. Hinata shrugged off her sleeping robe and hung it on one of the hooks, trying not to blush as she stripped in front of Ruto. Walking to the corner washing cubicle, she filled a bowl and pulled out a stool. "Sit down and I'll wash your back." "Okay." Hinata picked up the soap and a flannel, using them to lather her hands. Then she reached out cautiously, and her questing fingers encountered Ruto's head. "Close your eyes." "They're always closed," Ruto retorted with amusement. "I can see through my eyelids." Hinata's eyebrows shot up as she thought about it for a moment, then shaking her head, she poured some water over Ruto, and started to rub the soapy lather into his hair. Within seconds, she heard Ruto inhale sharply as her fingers caught in a knot, and she used the distribution of the suds to see where the hair was tangled, easing it loose. Soon, the hair was clean and Hinata poured the basin of warm water over Ruto, only to pause in shock. She had expected to see a shape as the water clung to his skin, but instead the water was turning invisible too as it flowed over him. Curious, Hinata brushed her hand across his back, and it came away wet with the invisible water slowly fading back into view. Shrugging, she lathered her hands again and started to wash Ruto's back, her hands gliding over his protruding ribs as she scrubbed his back and flanks while he used another cloth to wash his front and limbs. After a few moments, she refilled the basin and rinsed the suds off, then she gathered her courage again. "Will you wash my back?" The stool scraped slightly as Ruto stood up and Hinata moved forwards, only to trip over Ruto. As she fell, Ruto grabbed her to try and keep her upright, but only succeeded in slowing her fall and landing across her. Hinata's blush intensified as she realized which portion of his anatomy she was feeling pressed against her stomach. Then Ruto was off her and pulling her to her feet. Feeling as if her blush was causing her to overheat, Hinata turned and sat on the stool as the flannel and soap seemed to float into the air and move behind her. A moment later, Ruto poured some water over her as she had done to him, then began working the lather gently into her hair. Hinata closed her eyes and found herself leaning into his ministrations. Too soon her hair was rinsed and Hinata almost sighed before Ruto began washing her back. Once again, he did it the way that she had done to him, and Hinata almost fainted from embarrassment as his hands rubbed against her sides. "Hinata-sama?" Hinata forced her eyes open and looked blankly at the soap and flannel floating in front of her before she realized what Ruto was trying to tell her. Feeling her blush extend down to her chest, she mumbled her thanks as she took the cloth and began washing herself. "Hinata, can you look after Hanabi for a moment?" Hitomi asked, and Hinata nodded as Hitomi placed the carry basket by Hinata's side. Then she glanced at the book that Hinata was holding. "Reading that story again? I'm sure that Hanabi would love to listen to it as well." "Yes, cousin." Hinata smiled back, choosing not to mention that she was reading it aloud to help Ruto learn to read, as he had admitted that he only understood a few of the simpler kanji. Giving Ruto an apologetic glance, to which he responded by briefly tightening his one-handed hug, she turned back to the first page of the book, which had become extremely popular despite the other series that the author was famous for. Taking a breath, she smiled down at her sister as she started to read. The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi. A novel by Jiraiya of Konohagakure, dedicated to Nagato, Yahiko and Conan of Amigakure. May peace one day be enjoyed by all. Chapter 1. The journey of 1,000 steps begins with but a single pace, but it is the most important since without it, the journey cannot be traveled. Naruto stood outside the entrance to the Ninja Academy and looked at the building before him. And so, Naruto stood proud as his new sensei accepted him as part of the team. His new life as a ninja opened before him as he finished taking the first step on his new journey. Hinata finished placing the bookmark so that she would be able to find the second chapter when she decided to continue reading it. Hinata smiled down at Hanabi, then jumped with an eep, as a small round of applause sounded. Looking round, her eyes widened as she saw over a dozen Hyuga of both the main and the branch houses had settled around her to listen, completely unnoticed by her until that point. That was excellent reading, Hinata. Hitomi smiled as she rose from where she was sitting and walked over to kneel by Hanabi's side. I think your sister really enjoyed listening to you. Thank you. Hinata smiled as she slid the book into her bag and picked it up. She really is a good reader. One of the other Hyuga women commented and Hinata's smile widened slightly. You are. Ruto whispered into her ear and Hinata blushed at the sincerity of his voice. Hitomi stood, holding Hanabi in her basket. Thank you, Hinata. Now, I think it's almost time for dinner. Yes, cousin. Hinata replied, lifting her bag. I just need to put this away first. Hitomi nodded and strolled off. Hinata breathed a small sigh of relief, then Naruto whispered in her ear. I'll sneak some food from the kitchen and meet you in your room. All right. Hinata whispered back. Ruto's whimpers woke Hinata and she shifted position, cradling his head against her shoulder. After a moment, Ruto woke with a gasp. Ruto-kun, what happened? Nightmare. Naruto said quietly. Bad dreams, memories. Tell me. Hinata said, sitting up and shifting Naruto, so that he was just beside her, his hand in hers as she hugged him. For a long moment, Naruto remained quiet, then he started to speak. Before we met, I had a different name. Uzumaki Naruto. Chapter 2. Eek. Hinata sighed as the scream echoed through the mansion. Turning, she watched as the most junior of the three main branch elders ran past in a panic, her face set in a rictus of fear. Hinata sighed, then smiled slightly as she felt a heartwarmingly familiar presence at her shoulder. What did she do this time? She was discussing having the seal applied to you without your father's permission. Naruto whispered into her ear and Hinata's eyebrows shot up. So, what did you do to her, Ruto-kun? My ghost trick. Naruto giggled and Hinata hid a smile. Almost the entire clan, apart from Hinata, of course, was convinced that a ghost was haunting the clan, ever since the chief doctor was tripped up by an invisible foot, and a vial of powder jumped out of his pocket and rolled to Hayashi's foot. Hayashi had recognized the powder as a subtle poison and under interrogation, the doctor had admitted that he had been under orders to covertly kill Hitomi in order to weaken Hayashi's control of the clan, control that had been reinforced when the ambassador from Kumo had tried to break into Hinata's room and been felled by a mysterious strike to his manhood. Hayashi had used the incident to force Kumo to admit to its plan to acquire the Byakugan, and as a result, Kumo's reputation had taken a hit, while Konoha's had been boosted. The doctor had mysteriously died the next day when his caged bird seal was activated by an unknown member of the main branch. It was then that the haunting had started and many of the Hyuga were leaning towards the theory that it was the doctor attempting posthumously to make amends by punishing those who were working against the clan, a theory made slightly more believable by the fact that they couldn't see anything, even using their Byakugan. Of course, Hinata knew differently. She was also about to search your room. Hinata froze. My diary. Safe. Naruto whispered and Hinata sagged in relief. Her diary contained drawings of Naruto as based on her tactile explorations of his face, although when she activated her Byakugan, she was starting to be able to see him as a ripple in the air. Fortunately, no one else was able to, even Hanabi couldn't see Ruto, and he spent almost as much time around her as he did Hinata, discounting the nights when they curled up together to sleep, that was. Ruto, Hinata said quietly, What do we do when I enroll in the academy? There'll be too many people there, it'll be too crowded. We'll work something out. Naruto whispered back and Hinata smiled again at the optimism in his voice. Anyway, we still have. Ruto's voice stopped as a door was blasted out of its frame, coming to a rest with a groaning figure amidst the wreckage. Father! Hinata screamed, running over to him as several other figures stepped through the now empty doorframe. The sound of crying attracted her attention and Hinata glared at the elder who was holding a crying Hanabi, his hands wrapped round her throat. Hinata, you will submit to the caged bird seal for the good of the Hyuga clan. The elder ground out. Once that is done, you will begin training for your marriage and give up your silly dream of becoming a ninja. This is the will of the council. And if I don't? Hinata snarled. Then your sister dies. Hinata gasped, then her eyes narrowed as she saw a kunai slip from the pocket of the female elder who was glaring at her. No, she lives. The floating kunai lunged forwards, stabbing into the small of the elder's back, and he screamed in agony, releasing his hostage who promptly scrambled away from him, gasping for air. The lead elder collapsed to his knees as the kunai jerked itself out, then thrust forwards, catching the second of the three elders in her side. The woman grabbed the kunai as she fell. Stay away from me. Hinata gasped. Ruto was visible due to the splashes of blood highlighting him wherever they hit. Beside her, Hayashi inhaled sharply. Who is that? Might be a Kugan, can't see him. It's Ruto, he's my friend. Hinata quickly said, becoming aware even as she did so just how monumentally inadequate the explanation was. Nevertheless, Hayashi nodded slowly as he pulled himself to his feet and stepped forwards. Koharu, you have tried to undermine me for the last time. You are within range of my divination. And you within mine. Koharu countered as both men started to strike at each other, their hands moving too fast to be seen as they struck and countered with the skill of decades of practice. For almost a minute they fought as the other two elders lay on the ground in agony with several branch members, including Hizashi, applying first aid and tying them up. Then Ruto dashed forwards. Seeing the blood-outlined figure approaching, Koharu half-turned to strike him, realizing too late that in doing so he had opened himself to Hayashi's attack. An instant later, Hayashi was stood over the paralyzed elder. Ruto. Hanabi clung to the invisible boy and Hayashi's eyebrows shot up. Hinata, what is going on? Well, Hinata said slowly, twiddling her fingers and looking at the ground to avoid her father's piercing stare. When I look after Hanabi-chan, Ruto-kun helps. He often makes her toys seem to move by themselves, like he did with that vial just after Hanabi was born. Hayashi froze, then looked over to where Naruto was using a strip of fabric torn from one of the fallen elders to wipe off the blood that had spattered him. A moment later, the blood that remained seemed to fall to the floor. What the? I can't get the blood out, I'll have to throw it away. Naruto said quietly as Hanabi raised her hands and pouted cutely. A moment later, she giggled as Naruto picked her up and held her, her arms wrapped round his neck. That is rather disconcerting, Hayashi admitted, staring at his youngest daughter who seemed to be floating in the air. Hanabi's giggles increased as Naruto shifted her onto his back, then she burst out laughing as he started to run around the courtyard, making it look like she was flying. Incredible! Hayashi breathed as Hanabi seemed to slow and Hinata snagged her, pulling her into a hug. Walking over to the bloodstains, he reached down and carefully picked up the invisible jacket. This is very worn, he mused, running his fingers across it and pausing whenever he encountered a tear or hole. Not like I can get new clothes, Naruto said, the shrug somehow obvious in his voice. All of them are visible, they'll give me away. Hayashi motioned for his brother to approach. Ruto, please go with Hizashi. Brother, give him sandals, trousers, a sleeveless vest, fingerless gloves, and a hapari so that we can see which way he is looking, then bring him to my study. Hinata, please come with me, we need to talk. Hinata sighed and handed Hanabi to Hitomi. Coming, father. Dear, what are you planning? Hitomi asked and Hayashi smirked. A knock on the door preceded its opening and Hayashi hid a smile as his newest guest walked in, his presence shown by the visible clothes on his invisible body. Ah, Yuri Ruto, or should that be Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto? Naruto's head snapped round and Hinata looked at the floor. Sorry, I couldn't, It's all right. Naruto said, sliding his arm around Hinata and hugging her. I've watched him in action before. Hayashi raised an eyebrow at that. Indeed? Well, that is not important at this point. Hinata has told me a great deal, including where you have been sleeping. Naruto froze and Hayashi turned to look out of the window. I have no choice according to the traditions of my clan. Hinata, you have been sharing a room with a male not of the clan, and even sleeping in the same bed. He has seen you naked and you have shared a bath. Therefore, the tension built up as Hayashi slowly turned back, his face expressionless. I have no choice but to congratulate you on your betrothal. Hinata staggered and only Naruto's supporting arm prevented her from collapsing as the aura of intimidation vanished. Ha! Hayashi smirked as Naruto tried to recover from his shock. There will be certain conditions though. You need to be examined to find out if your invisibility is a Kekkai Genkai. If it is, the Hyuga will support you in starting your own clan, although Hinata will receive the sleeping bird seal so that any children inherit your bloodline only. If it isn't a bloodline, you will marry into the Hyuga clan, although no seals will be required because of how much you have already done for the clan. Either way, we will help you retrieve your clan scrolls from the vault underneath the wreckage of your father's house, and on behalf of the clan, I ask for permission to learn the Rasengan as it may prove very advantageous to our Juken. Of course. Naruto managed. Do you know how to channel chakra yet? Hayashi pressed and Naruto nodded. Yes, Hinata-san taught me. I can't do the leaf exercise though. Hayashi raised a quizzical eyebrow as Hinata giggled. And what happened? The first one shredded itself, the second one scrunched into a small ball. No, Ruto-kun. Hinata corrected. That was the third one, the second one was the one that caught fire. Hayashi froze for a moment, then turned to his desk and started to rummage through it, soon pulling out a trio of blank pieces of paper. These are chakra papers, they show the elemental affinities of the user. He said, handing one to Hinata and the second to Naruto. To use them, you channel a little bit of your chakra through, like this. The piece of paper Hayashi was holding seemed to darken slightly, then it crumbled to dust. As you can see, we Hyuga are earth-natured. What the? Hinata looked in shock at the soggy piece of paper in her hand. Tusan, does this mean? Suiton. Water-natured. Hayashi breathed. Juken was created to serve those with earth affinities. Your water nature means that one of the other styles will have to be retrieved from the archives, maybe Juho. Naruto-san, if you would? Naruto looked down at his paper and channeled a little bit of his chakra into it. The paper seemed to fade to partial transparency even as it split smoothly down its length, then the right piece crinkled into a ball, while the left piece caught fire and burned into ashes. 3 affinities? Hayashi gaped before pulling himself together. By Kami. But the fire, it had a blue tinge to it. Wait a minute. Hayashi quickly scribbled a note before folding it and handing it to Hinata. Take this to Akiko and have her run a full examination of you both. Hayashi said. As she is the most senior trusted clan medic, it will be very thorough and almost certainly very embarrassing, especially for you, Naruto-san, but it is necessary if we are to know if you are joining our clan or Hinata is joining yours. You may go. You asked for me to bring the report, Lord Hayashi? Hayashi looked up at the gray-haired elderly Hyuga in the doorway. He nodded and motioned for her to sit opposite him. I did, Akiko-san. How did the examinations go? Akiko sank to the floor easily, despite her age. Hinata's examination went without a hitch. I did hers first both to reassure Ruto-san of what was going to happen, and so that she could reassure him when it was his turn. Hinata is still a virgin, if that was what you were worried about. No sign of anything happening in that area. I admit to having had some concern about that. Hayashi admitted. It is good that Naruto is so honorable. No seals, no trace of poison or anything like that. Akiko continued. She has an incredibly strong water affinity though, and her earth affinity is. Juken will always be a problem for her, but I'd like to recommend Mednin training. I would be happy to oversee the start of her training in my spare time. As long as Hinata agrees, that will not be a problem. Hayashi agreed. And regarding her potential problems with Juken, I have had the Juho scrolls pulled from the archives. It is a pity that we currently have no Juho practitioners to teach her though. Akiko nodded. Overall, the only thing odd about her is that her chakra it is as if something has changed it very slightly, fractionally altering how her Byakugan works. She can see Naruto with it, I cannot explain how. He remains invisible to me, even when I strain my Byakugan to its limits. Interesting. Hayashi mused. Any explanation? Chakra infusion would be my best guess. Akiko shrugged, only it's more as if her chakra has changed in response to something else. I can't really explain it. Hayashi frowned. Hinata informed me that she often slept using Naruto as if her were a plushie hugging him. Could it have been his chakra that caused the change? It's not impossible. Akiko conceded. In fact, that would explain why her chakra is slightly paler than normal for a Hyuga. Apart from the slight lessening of visibility, I don't believe that there'll be any other effects, long or short term, since it seems to have stabilized. And Naruto? Was trickier. Akiko admitted. I had to ask Hinata to help collect some of the samples. I took the blood sample. It was quite enlightening to find out how much I rely on my Byakugan for things like that, but as for the rest, I gave them instructions and left them to it for a few minutes. When I returned, Hinata looked like all the blood in her body had flowed into her face. And? Hayashi asked, refusing to rise to the bait. Naruto's invisibility seems to be linked to his chakra, which by the way is already above Kage level according to the chakra meter. Akiko said. The urine and feces samples started to turn visible after a few hours. Not immediately, but by the time I'd finished running the analysis, I could just about see them. I put them aside to see how long it takes before they become fully visible. Conversely, his blood is still invisible, even after 6 hours outside his body. I ran some tests and I am almost certain that it is a Kekkai Genkai. I'll need to run a few more tests to be certain, but I am fairly certain that he will pass his invisibility on to his children. Once he gets old enough to provide a viable semen sample, I'll know for certain beyond any doubt. Hayashi nodded. And the genetic comparison? First test I ran. Akiko smirked. He is, without any doubt at all, the son of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. Will he be going by his original name? Hayashi shook his head. No, he has taken the clan name Urei, and we shall honor his decision. Place him in our records as Urei Ruto, one of the favorite of the clan. Of course. Akiko said. And now I must tell my eldest daughter that she is going to need to receive the sleeping bird seal. Hayashi said as he rose to his feet. On the other hand, a clan of allies invisible even to the Byakugan. And almost certainly the Sharingan. Akiko interjected. And the Sharingan, Hayashi acknowledged with a nod, would be an incredible advantage in the future. It could even rival the famed Akamichi Narayamanako alliance. Clothing could be an issue though. Akiko noted. Being naked on a battlefield isn't my idea of a good thing. Hayashi froze. I hadn't considered that. It certainly puts a new spin on the phrase full frontal assault. Any ideas? Chakra cloth, maybe. Akiko mused. Of course, it'll have to be fully reactive, which would be expensive. Perhaps he should get a fundoshi made from it to start with, then he can simply shed the clothes he can't turn invisible while keeping his bits tucked away. As he earns more money from missions, he can get new items made for himself. Excellent. Hayashi said, then paused as Akiko lifted her hand. The problem we do have, though, is his bunshin. If he manages to learn a normal bunshin, which alone will be incredibly difficult because of his chakra reserves, it'll be invisible, thus useless. We cannot teach him an earth clone because of his affinities, and no one in the clan knows the smoke clone or the lightning clone. I don't know if there is even such a thing as a wind clone. I suggest, therefore, that he is taught the Kage Bunshin as soon as you feel he can handle it. It'll also increase his combat potential immensely. Hayashi paled as he thought it through. Kami. Invisibility, Kage level reserves and the Kage Bunshin. He could do more damage in battle than his father ever did. It would give your daughters a legion of invisible guardians, though. Akiko pointed out with a slight upwards twitch of her lips. Hayashi froze for a moment, then nodded. True, and that thought is rather reassuring, in a blood-freezingly terrifying sort of way. Wow. Hinata and Naruto breathed in unison, looking round the main room of the small cottage tucked into the corner of a small courtyard which was visible out of the front window and door. The corner of the room contained a small kitchen while a bedroom with a double bed was visible through a door with the bathroom just beyond it. Until such time as you choose to move into your own compound, this shall be your home. Hayashi said as Hanabi laughingly erupted out of the bedroom, where she had been bouncing on the bed, and scurried over to come to a stop in front of Naruto and Hinata. Naruto picked her up and Hinata moved close to support her on the other side. Although you are good with children, Hitomi laughed from behind them, I would quite appreciate not becoming a grandmother until you have both reached the rank of Chunin at least, preferably Jonin. Speaking of which, Hinata, we need to have the talk at some point. Hinata turned bright red at that. Mother. I will leave you now as I have an appointment I must prepare for. Hayashi said as he turned to the door. Naruto, please safeguard my daughter. Sir, I would die before letting her get hurt. Naruto said as firmly as he could and Hayashi nodded, showing his respect for Naruto's claim. I know. Hyuga-san. Lord Hokage. Hayashi replied as he entered the office. Your message said that you had something of great importance to deal with. Hayashi nodded and briefly activated his Byakugan. I do, if you could ask your 4ANBU to leave. 4? Hiruzen interrupted, I only have, where are they? Ceiling, sofa, bookcase and hat stand. Hayashi said slowly, then he ducked as a triple barrage of kunai converged on the last location. The hat stand seemed to ripple and a black-clad figure with a plain white mask leapt towards the window, only for Hayashi to deliver a pair of juken strikes to its legs even as Hiruzen unsealed a bowstaff and lunged forwards with a strike that shattered the figure's left shoulder and pinned it against the wall. Take him to Ibiki. Hiruzen ground out and the three true ANBU appeared, grabbed the rogue ninja and vanished in a shunshin. Anyone else? Hayashi reactivated his Byakugan and looked around. The closest person to us is your secretary, Lord Hokage. If you could please activate your privacy jutsu? Hiruzen nodded slowly, then his hand reached out to touch a small seal set into his desk. The walls seemed to flash as the Fuin jutsu activated. So, Hayashi, what is so important? Only that I have located the son of the Yondaime, Hayashi smirked, enjoying the gobsmacked expression on Hiruzen's face. And I wish for him to enter the academy as a ward of the Hyuga. Chapter 3. It was the final two figures who filed into the classroom that caught Irika's attention. One of them was pale-skinned and dark-haired, looked round nervously, and yet he could catch a glimpse of the steel that was underneath the silken glove. The other. He didn't even know what gender it was. It almost hovered by the shoulder of the first one, who was obviously a Hyuga, based on her eyes, but not a single square inch of skin showed. It wore dark gray loose trousers with solid boots, as opposed to the normal ninja sandals, while its upper half was concealed by a pale thigh-length hooded jacket, a dark high-neck top underneath, a white mask without any discernible features and black gauntlets covering its hands. Not an inch of skin or a single strand of hair was revealed by the loose, flowing clothes. The mismatched duo walked to adjoining chairs with the cloaked figure continuing to hover at her shoulder, then it saw her properly seated before it took its own place, between her and the rest of the room. During this, the others in the room had gone silent, watching with wide eyes. "All right," Irika managed as he accepted the student list from Mizuki. "My name is Yumano Irika, this is Mizuki, my assistant instructor. When I call your name, stand up and introduce yourself to your classmates. Mizuki and I will go first to show you how it is done. My name is Yumano Irika, I like studying and teaching. I dislike those who abandon things before they are completed, and my dream for the future is to get you all to be the best ninja that you can be. I am Mizuki," as Irika said. Mizuki grinned, sweeping his silver hair back. "My likes are practicing with my Foma shuriken and learning new tricks, my dislikes are those who don't pay attention, and my dream for the future is to become a jonin and get to lead a team of my own. Now that you know how it is done, we can begin properly," Irika said, glancing at the list. Aburame. In one corner, a figure almost as well wrapped as the one sitting next the Hyuga girl stood up, adjusting his sunglasses. "My name is Aburame Shino, my likes are collecting and breeding bugs. My dislikes are those who kill bugs. My dream is to prove myself able to lead my clan." Irika nodded as Shino sat down. Akimichi. Several of the students had to hide their sniggers as the fat boy stood up, since the bandana he was wearing made it look like he was wearing a pair of underpants on his head. "I am Akimichi Choji, my likes are my friend Shikamaru and my food, my dislikes are those who call me fat. I'm just big-boned, and my dream for the future is to master all my clan's jutsu. I'm really nervous," Hinata whispered, and Naruto looked at her through his mask, which had been carefully made with special seals that caused it to be transparent from the inside, just like the masks used by the ANBU. "You'll do fine," he whispered, giving her a brief one-armed hug. Hinata buried her face in the junction of his shoulder and neck, then sighed as they heard her clan name. "Knock them dead, Hinata Heim." Hinata nodded and stood up, taking a deep breath. "I am honored to meet you all, my name is Hyuga Hinata, I like flower pressing and rutokuin. I dislike those who hate for no reason, and I hope to become a good kunoichi." Blushing, Hinata sat down, her hand almost subconsciously finding Naruto's as the next name was called, and a feral-looking boy stood up. "You were brilliant," Naruto whispered, and Hinata nodded, looking down at the desk. Thank you." "Hey," Naruto whispered, his voice bubbling with laughter. "Why the stutter? You've been kicking me around the training field for the last few weeks, remember?" Hinata's blush intensified, but she pulled her head back up, sitting proud as a blonde girl stood up. "My name is Yamanaka Ino, I like flowers and gossip, I hate those who make fun of my name, and my dream is to become a kunoichi." Ino sat down and everyone's attention turned to the last student on the list. Yuri. Irika read, and Naruto rose, minimizing his movements, so as to look as mysterious as possible. Beside him, Hinata tried not to smile at his drama teasing. "My name is Yuri Ruto," Naruto proclaimed in a voice that showed even less emotion than Shino. "I live for the one who returned me to life, Hyuga Hinata. I will destroy any who try to harm her or her loved ones. Only she of all here may gaze upon my uncovered form, hence my robes. My dream is to be worthy of her." Naruto sat back down, grinning at the intense silence that had settled on the entire classroom. Then Mizuki spoke nervously. "Returned him too. When I found him, he had no one." Hinata shrugged as she reminisced. "I just helped him to find something to live for. He seems quite devoted." Irika managed, and Hinata turned slightly to give Naruto a soft smile. "I saw him take down 2 of the elders to save me and my sister." Irika and Mizuki both stared in shock at the cloaked boy. To even survive against one Hyuga elder, a position which demanded the rank of at least special jonin, was no easy feat. To not only face off against, but to take down two was regarded as something that only the Hokage in his prime could have achieved. "Ask my father, if you want," Hinata added with a wide smile. "How do you eat like that?" Hinata and Naruto exchanged glances even as Naruto used the low-level genjutsu he'd learned from several Hyuga Anbu to make it seem as if his mask was still in place as he quickly lifted it up and took another bite of food. Ino growled as she stalked towards the bench the pair were sitting on. "You just ate that straight through the mask." "How?" Hinata giggled as Naruto took another bite, making it look like the chopsticks had passed their burden straight through the mask. Then a small twitch caused the mask to drop back down as Ino reached out. "That mask is solid," she half-shrieked, her fingers stroking and tapping the mask as she tried to find out the secret behind it. "How do you do that?" "Practice." Naruto deadpanned, earning a fuming glare from the blonde girl. "And what sort of ninja are you?" Ino continued. "Stealth and assassination," Naruto said, preparing to move, and Ino snorted. "Yeah, as if you could do that in those. Hey, where'd you go?" Hinata sighed as a pile of fabric pressed against the back of her feet. Naruto had trained almost solidly for weeks to reach the point that he could disrobe in less than 2 seconds and fully reclothe himself within 7. "Where is Eep?" Ino spun round, one hand clamped over where Naruto had smacked her lightly. Then an invisible hand flipped her ponytail over her head. Ino spun around again, trying to find her unseen assailant only to collapse onto all fours as Naruto poked her knees from behind, then he spanked her again as she fell. As she struggled to stand up, Naruto returned to his place by Hinata's side, fully cloaked once again. How did you?" Ino managed and Naruto lowered his head to take another bite of food. "Troublesome," a voice said from one side and Naruto half-turned to see a pineapple-haired boy and his larger friend staring at them. "I couldn't follow you, but I know that it wasn't a simple case of speed." "Shut it, Shika." Ino almost howled, stalking over to the reclining boy. "Shut up and tell me how he did that." Shikamaru stared at her for a long moment. "Well, which should I do? Shut up or tell you?" Ino fumed as several of the others laughed at her, then she stormed off. "Troublesome girl." Shikamaru sighed, his eyes carefully watching and evaluating the cloaked boy from under heavy eyelids. "Hello, Hanabi." Hinata smiled as her younger sister ran up to her. "Did you have a good time?" "Yep." Hanabi laughed, then she turned to Naruto. "Flying. Give me a minute." Naruto laughed and Hinata shook her head as she held out her arms. "I'll take them to our room." She laughingly sighed as Naruto quickly shed his visible clothing. Pausing just long enough to kiss Hinata on her cheek, thus making her blush furiously, Naruto took Hanabi's hands and swung her onto his back, leaning forwards to make it seem to anyone watching that she was hovering horizontally, her arms stretched out in front of her with the fabric crinkling at the wrists being the only thing showing where Naruto was holding her. 10 minutes, then we have some homework and training to do." Hinata smiled. "I know, Hinata-heim." Naruto laughed. "You ready, Hanabi-chan?" "Yep, flying." Hanabi chirped, then she started squealing with joy and Naruto bounded forwards, carrying her along the path at high speed. "Faster! Faster! Wahoo! That is still rather disconcerting." Hayashi said from behind her and Hinata had to fumble frantically to avoid dropping the clothes she was holding. "How is it that only you can see him with your Byakugan? He is still invisible to the rest of us." "I don't know." Hinata replied, trying to reseat the bundle of fabric. "How well can you see him?" Hayashi inquired as he paced by Hinata's side. "I can see him almost like he's a glass figure," Hinata admitted with a slight shrug. "I still can't make out all of his features, but I can tell where he is as long as he's moving slightly." When he holds still, I still find it very hard to find him if I don't know where he is. Wawahoho! Hanabi cried as she zoomed past them. Faster! Faster, Nii-san! For a moment, the two Hyugas stared at the young girl as she vanished round the corner, then Hinata giggled. Hayashi looked down at her, then shook his head, a small smile playing on his own lips. May I assume that you will both be coming to join me for dinner? We would be honored to. Hinata quickly replied. Excellent. Hayashi said as they reached the split in the path. Then I will send a branch member to summon you. Since there is some business to discuss, I would suggest semi-formal. Yes, Tusan. Hayashi fought down a sigh as his guest entered through the main gate. The man was almost the complete antithesis of the Hyuga. Where the Hyuga were restrained, he was exuberant. Where the Hyuga were known for their emotional control, he was almost hyper-emotional. Where the Hyuga wore dignified robes and clothing of the finest fabrics, he wore bright green spandex. The only things that he and the Hyuga had in common were their almost fanatical loyalty to Konoha, their renowned skills in taijutsu and the color of their hair, although no Hyuga would ever be seen with that hairstyle. Mato-san, I thank you for coming. It was no problem, Hyuga-dano. Guy grinned and Hayashi almost blinked as Guy's teeth glinted. May I ask why you called upon my expertise? You may. Hayashi admitted, motioning for the taijutsu specialist to walk beside him. But before we do so, I must ask that everything you see or learn here be held in confidence from those who do not already know. I understand, Hyuga-dano, and I will keep all your secrets safe. Guy declaimed, causing a few of the other Hyuga traversing the courtyard to stare at him before hurrying on their way. Excellent. Hayashi replied, fighting down the urge to facepalm at Guy's enthusiasm. I have need of your skills as Konoha's premier taijutsu specialist. Ah, the Juken. Guy said, suddenly turning serious. Although I admit that it is indeed a truly formidable style, it does have quite a few weaknesses in the field. Hayashi almost froze for a moment. The Juken was the result of several centuries of development and adaptation to maximize the use of the Byakugan in close-quarters combat. What possible weaknesses could it have? The Juken is rather weak against ranged attacks and elemental jutsu. Guy said just loud enough for Hayashi to hear him. Although the base stance is solid, it does not aid greatly in evasion maneuvers as opposed to blocking or countering, while the high level of reliance on the Byakugan means that a technique as simple as a chakra flare would seriously degrade its efficiency. Hayashi's eyes widened. A chakra flare? Such a technique was completely useless. Except against those with a dojutsu. Such a simple technique, it was a miracle that such a move hadn't been used against them yet. I see that there is far more I need to talk to you about than I thought. Hayashi admitted, causing Guy to look at him curiously. The original reason I asked for your aid is because the Hyuga will eventually be sponsoring the formation of a new clan which has a Kekkai Genkai that renders both the Byakugan and the Sharingan almost useless. My daughter's fiancé needs to be trained in two forms of taijutsu, one for when he is cloaked and one for when he is relying on his blood limit. And what would this Kekkai Genkai of his be, Hyuga-dano? You will see for yourself in a moment. Hayashi said with a slight upwards twitch of his lips as they came to a stop outside the dining hall. The door slid open and Guy followed Hayashi in, only to freeze at the sight before him. What in Kami's name? Jonin Mato Guy, allow me to introduce you to Urei Ruto, currently the only known wielder of the Toton blood limit. Guy stared at Naruto, who waved back at him, an action only visible due to the half-gloves he was wearing. After several minutes, he inhaled sharply and shook his head. Lord Hayashi, this has to be the most potentially terrifying Kekkai Genkai that I have ever encountered. Why do you think the Hyuga clan has promised to sign an eternal pact with the Urei clan once it is established? Hayashi shot back. Guy stared at him, then back at Naruto. May I? Hayashi nodded and Guy walked over to Naruto. Please, stand and stretch your arms out. Naruto turned his head to face Hinata, who simply shrugged, then he rose to his feet. Guy carefully ran his hands along Naruto's arms, then crouched and examined his legs. Standing up again, he carefully felt Naruto's neck, then held out a hand. Make a fist and push against my hand as hard as you can. Right first, then left. With another shrug, Naruto followed the instructions, then Guy stepped back and looked him up and down. I will need to spar against him briefly to get a true feel for the style best suited for him, Guy said to Hayashi, but I think I have several ideas. I assume that he will go fully covered under normal circumstances, so for when he is cloaked, I would recommend the style the Juken is derived from. Bagwazang. Hayashi nodded. Yes, we have the scrolls for that style in our archives. Several of its katas are almost identical to the basic Juken katas. We can teach that. In fact, if I am not mistaken, I think he is already training in it. And for when he has shed his clothing, Zingyikwen would be the most logical choice. Guy mused, ignoring Hinata's embarrassed blush. Since he would have no trouble moving close, the linear attacks it is based around would be highly effective. I do not know that style, and I do not know of anyone in the clan who does. Hayashi unwillingly admitted. Are you willing to teach it? Of course. Guy smiled, taking a thumbs-up pose. I would be honored to have this most youthful boy as my student. He is attending the academy. Hayashi noted and Guy nodded. I understand. When it is time for his lessons, should I pick him up from the academy? Hayashi paused, then he slowly nodded. If you are willing to escort my daughter and nephew at the same time, yes. Of course. Guy grinned as Hayashi moved to the end of the table and sat down. I would be honored to. Mato Guy seems very enthusiastic. Naruto said as he poured the water over Hinata's head and started to apply the shampoo. Hinata sighed in pleasure at the feel of his fingers massaging her scalp, separating each strand of hair as they did so. He is a renowned jonin. She replied after a moment. He is known as the taijutsu expert of Konoha, to the point that he rarely uses ninjutsu, kenjutsu, or any other discipline. A true specialist. Naruto realized. And the rival he mentioned? Hatake Kakashi. Hinata said. The copycat ninja who knows over 1,000 jutsu. He studied under your father. I'll have to meet him at some point. Naruto mused as he poured more water over Hinata's head to wash out the soapy suds. Picking up the soap, he lathered his hands and began rubbing her back and shoulders. I wonder if he would be willing to teach us? Us? Hinata asked, activating her Byakugan and half-turning to look at him. Naruto smiled back at her. Hinata-chan, do you really think I would leave you behind? Ignoring her unclad state, Hinata spun round and grabbed Naruto, hugging him tightly and burying her face into the crook of his neck. For a moment, neither moved, then Naruto gently pushed Hinata back onto the small stool and resumed washing her back. So, Hinata managed after a short while. What do you think about our classmates? Most of them are all right. Naruto admitted. The other girls are rather loud and they seem overly worshipful of Sasuke. Hinata shrugged. I think he's just sulking about how his older brother keeps outdoing him. At least he smiles enough that he isn't a total emo. True. Naruto admitted as he washed away the suds. My turn. Hinata rose and let Naruto sit down as she refilled the bucket. I would say close your eyes, but you always have them closed anyway. She joked and Naruto laughed. True, my Heim. In fact, blub-brulerd. You may want to keep your mouth closed when I do that. Hinata giggled, putting down the empty bucket and picking up the bottle of shampoo. Now, hold still. Chapter 4. I shall train harder to beat you, my eternal rival. Mato Guy paused as the voice sounded, then he turned to find a wide-eyed youth standing there, a black-haired boy clad in black shinobi trousers, a dark brown wraparound shirt and sandals. As he turned, his long ponytail briefly came into view. Ignore him. Niji sighed, walking past behind his cousin. He's not important. I am Rock Lee. The boy shouted. Remember the name, for I shall prove myself to be a true ninja using only taijutsu. Guy blinked, then walked over to the boy. An interesting goal, but why only taijutsu? Lee seemed to shrink as he looked at the ground. I cannot channel chakra to perform jutsus, so ninjutsu and genjutsu is forever denied to me. But I shall never give up. Guy grinned. An admirable attitude, your flames of youth burn brightly. I am Mato Guy, Konoha's green beast and the premier taijutsu master of Konohagakure. Lee looked as if Kami had granted him his fondest wish. Will you train me? You will need to train hard and constantly. Guy warned, then his smile widened. But with your attitude and physique, I believe that you may be suitable to learn the Goken. The strong fist. Lee breathed. Yash. I shall train constantly to prove myself worthy. Then meet me here after the academy finishes tomorrow, and I shall start your instruction. Guy grinned, a grin that was matched by Lee even as Niji sighed. May I suggest Kenjutsu as well? Hinata said quietly, causing all the males to look at her. Just focusing on taijutsu will limit his range, like Juken does to the Hyuga even with your input, Guy-sensei. Adding a sword will increase his range, and if he combines it with taijutsu. Guy frowned in thought, then nodded slowly. An excellent suggestion, Hinata-san. I know a couple of excellent Kenjutsu specialists who may be willing to teach. I will approach them about this. Ruto-san, I must speak with your guardian. I believe that Lee-san may become a good sparring partner for you. Then I shall train until we meet tomorrow. Lee shouted before running off. Yash. For a moment, Hinata, Niji and Naruto stood stock still, then Naruto broke the silence. What just happened? How was the academy today? Nara Shikako queried as his son slouched through the door. Troublesome. Shikamura grumbled. That Yurei boy. I can't understand him. He's hiding a lot and I haven't figured it out yet. It's been 6 months, I managed to figure everyone else out within one, but Ruto. Oh? Shikako asked even as he waved for his son to sit on the other side of the shogi board. I overheard a rumor that he has an unusual Kekkai Genkai. Do you know what it is? Shikamura paused with his hand hovering over one of the shogi tiles. He really does have a blood limit? That is, interesting. I wonder what it could be. A dojutsu, maybe? Shikako suggested as he moved one of his pawns forwards to clear the way for his bishop. Shikamura shook his head. From the little bits of information I have managed to obtain, I think it's more a body type. He can vanish without trace and reappear, but it isn't speed. He doesn't displace enough dust for that, and Ino's clothes didn't get caught in a wave of displaced air the first time he did it to her. A jutsu? Again, Shikamaru indicated his disagreement even as he moved a pawn forwards. I have heard of invisibility jutsus, but to use one in the first year of the academy? And with the level of perfection that the incident indicated? Very unlikely. Shikako moved one of his gold generals, then looked at his son. So, do you have a theory? Yes, but it's hard to believe. Shikamura said, moving another pawn forwards. The only thing that fits all the observed facts, and which explain his robes and mask, is natural invisibility. Yet I have never heard of a clan with that Kekkai Genkai, and if it existed, it would be renowned and feared by all. You said that he was of the Urei clan. Urei Ruto, although I've heard him being called Naruto a time or two by Hyuga Hinata when they thought they were alone together. Shikamaru confirmed, concentrating on the board, and thus missing the expression of shock on his father's face. He seems very attached to Hyuga Hinata, acts like her bodyguard. Are you certain of that name? Shikako demanded, and Shikamaru froze, then looked up in confusion. Yes, Naruto. Why? Naruto. Shikako whispered to himself. Could it possibly be, is the Yandame's son still? Father? Shikako shook his head and refocused on the board. Just thinking to myself. Shikamaru gave him a questioning look, then looked down at the shogi board. Troublesome. Pardon? You hurt me. Shikamaru said. You are possibly the brightest student I know here, and I could use your help. On what? Haruno Sakura asked, folding her arms over her chest. Yurei Roto. Shikamaru stated. What do we know about him? He's creepy, totally devoted to Hinata, has tons of stamina and... Sakura paused, her face reflecting her confusion. That's it. We don't know anything at all about him. My father says he has a Kekkai Genkai, and may be related to the Yandame. Shikamaru provided and Sakura blinked. But the Yandame was an orphan who... Damn it, I know this. Aha. Who married Uzumaki Kushina and they had a son, Uzumaki Naruto. What was that name again? Shikamaru snapped and Sakura blinked at his sudden intensity. Uzumaki. Naruto, Roto, wait, does that mean? Naruto is a popular name, but only for the younger children, not those our age. It is not impossible. Shikamaru mused. They are about the same age and Yurei Roto only appeared just before he entered the academy, but why would he be totally concealed? No one would have known who he was unless he truly resembled one of his parents, and even then, a pair of sunglasses and a bandana would more than suffice. Unless something happened to him. Shikamaru finished slowly. I didn't pay attention to the report. He was hit by lightning while spying on a genin. Sakura supplied. The bolt totally vaporized him, no remains were ever found. There must be more than that to the story. Shikamaru fumed. Wait, spying on a genin. What was the genin doing? I don't know. Why? It could be important. Shikamaru said, then he sighed. Full body burns from a lightning bolt. That would explain the need for all-concealing clothing. It would also explain the length of time he was missing for, he would have needed to heal, and the Hyuga clan were known to be supporters of the Yandame. Hinata was probably one of those who helped him to recover. That's why he said she was his reason to live and why they seemed so attached to each other, she was probably his primary carer. Not certain about his Kekkai Genkai though. Perhaps it lets him turn invisible for short periods of time? Which would explain how he humiliated Ino the first time he showed off. Sakura finished. He activated his invisibility and used it to keep flipping her hair and spanking her before returning to Hinata's side. It makes sense. Shikamaru nodded. Of course, we can't tell anyone other than the Hokage about this. If IWA finds out that the son of their greatest enemy is still alive, Kumo tried to kidnap his mother, they'd be a threat as well. Sakura added. I agree. Let's keep this quiet. We need to confirm our theory with the Hokage. Shikamaru decided. I'll persuade father to get us an audience with him, even though it will probably be quite troublesome. That is quite a theory. Hiruzen said after Shikamaru and Sakura finished explaining their theory. From where you started and with the information you possessed, it is quite incredible how accurate your conclusions are. Shikamaru nodded in satisfaction and glanced at the other two adults in the room. His father was looking proud while the other man, Hyuga Hayashi, was frowning slightly. You realize that all of this is classified as an S-rank secret? Hiruzen added and Sakura nodded almost frantically. That's why Shikamaru and I agreed that we'd only discuss it with you, Hokage Dano. And have you told your mother? No, Lord Hokage. Sakura said quickly. She hated Naruto, she claimed that he was a demon. She still has the spiral scar. Hiruzen blinked a couple of times at that, then his eyes widened in recognition. Aha, I see. So, if she found out that Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto was still alive, then she'd try to kill him. Sakura finished. Or have him killed. Especially since she lost out to Uzumaki Kushina. Hiruzen blinked again and Sakura sighed. My mother had a major crush on the yandere when she was younger, but she failed to get him for herself. She still holds the grudge. I see. Hiruzen finally managed. As it happens, I already knew all of this, but I am very impressed that you two managed to work out as much as you have done. Am I correct in assuming that we should not change our actions towards Roto and Hinata? Shikamaru asked and Hiruzen nodded. Immediately, yes. Should you wish to befriend them, do it slowly so that no one suspects anything other than normal growing up. Sure. Shikamaru shrugged. Not that it really matters to me, I'm not going to be on their team after all. Oh? Shikako asked and Shikamaru smirked. 8 clan heirs and the daughter of a council member in one class? I'll be teamed up with Ino and Choji due to family tradition and the alliance between our clans. Hinata and Roto are currently claiming the top 2 spots, so I bet they'll be teamed up with Kiba since he's lagging behind so much, he really hates the written portions, and that leaves. Yes. Sakura yelled before blushing. Sorry. Yes, Sakura will probably be teamed up with Sasuke and Shino. Shikamaru finished. Sakura, Sasuke hates fangirls, it's something his brother taught him. Sakura froze. You really should train more, although you do have another 3 years to improve. Shikamaru added. Historically, the Uchiha prefer strong women. According to Ino, Itachi is dating Inuzuka Hana. I thought gossip was too troublesome for you. Sakura teased and Shikamaru sighed. Due to the links between our clans and the fact that our fathers were on the same genin team, I have to put up with that troublesome blonde at least once a week. It's a real drag. Shikako snorted with hastily concealed humor as Shikamaru gave him a flat look. Your ability to uncover secrets has been noted, and now that you do know, your ability to keep secrets will be tested. That goes for you in particular, Sakura. You must not tell your mother about this, she does not need to know, Hiruzen said. You are dismissed. Shikako led the 2 youngsters out of the office and Hiruzen and Hayashi exchanged glances after they were gone. Lightning burns. Hayashi finally said. That boy certainly has some interesting views. But he unknowingly created a very good cover story. Hiruzen shot back. One which you may wish to use. Hayashi nodded. I agree. I will have Naruto and my daughters learn their new cover story once I return to the compound. Of course. Hiruzen nodded, giving Hayashi tacit permission to depart. As Hayashi exited the tower, his attention was drawn to the slouching figure waiting for him. Shikaku. Hayashi. The Nara patriarch nodded back, straightening slightly and moving to Hayashi's side. Is there a problem? Shikako shook his head slightly. No. Has Roto claimed his inheritance? We have the scrolls in the archives and Roto is already working on his basic Fuinjutsu. Hayashi replied, briefly activating his Byakugan to ensure that they weren't being overheard. And his invisibility is indeed a Kekkai Genkai? We were able to confirm it recently beyond any doubt. Hayashi said, carefully not letting Shikako see his expression. It is indeed a Kekkai Genkai and his children will inherit it. To confirm it like that means that you must have taken a sample from. Shikako started, then he stopped talking and coughed. Yes, I see. May I ask if he is starting a new branch of the Hyuga clan? No. Hayashi said, inwardly thankful for the conversational save. It is our hope that he can become the founder of a new clan. You will need help for that. Shikako mused. Since he will be the only member, that takes 7 other clans to support the process. He is engaged to Hinata. Hayashi interjected and Shikako raised an eyebrow. Then since he is to be married to a clan member who has agreed to leave her clan, that cuts it down to needing the support of 4 clans. Due to who his father was, you may count on my support when the time comes. And with your support comes that of Choza and Inoichi. Hayashi nodded. Thank you. However, Shikaka said, causing Hayashi to glance at him, we will need to start laying the groundwork so that it seems like a natural extension of the alliance between our clans. As such, may I suggest that Hinata and Ruto visit occasionally, maybe in your company as you seek closer relations with other clans for the good of Konoha, maybe? A valid reason for doing so, Hayashi said after several thoughtful moments. Although we both know that it is unlikely that Hinata and Ruto will be on the same team as your son, doesn't mean that they shouldn't learn at least a few things about each other. Shikaka shrugged. After all, they will probably have to work alongside each other in the future. By the way, Hayashi glanced at Shikako. About Ruto, did he really suffer full-body burns, or is there another reason he is cloaked? Just so I don't accidentally do something wrong, you understand. Hayashi paused for a moment. Well, it relates to his blood limit. Inoichi stared at his lazy teammate in shock. What? You hurt me. Shikaka yawned. Hayashi will be bringing his daughters and his ward Uriai Ruto over to the next gathering at the Nara compound. He knows how informal we are, right? Choza asked before taking a bite out of the onigiri in his hand. He knows. Shikaka sighed. And he's okay with this? He is. Shikaka muttered. Then why? Inoichi demanded, completely perplexed. Hayashi and I are setting a long-term play into motion, no matter how troublesome it is. Shikaka said. It will let us repay a debt we owe. A debt? I don't recall us owing the Hyuga a debt. Inoichi mused and Shikako took a sip of his sake before answering. We don't, but it'll let us repay the debt we owe to someone who died for Konoha. I'd tell you more, but I need Hayashi and Hiruzen to give me permission. And asking would be troublesome. Choza chortled before reverting to a more serious outlook. You wouldn't be doing this without a proper reason, so all right. But I expect to find out what it is about at some point. Inoichi nodded in agreement and Shikaka sighed. All right. I'll make sure you get enough warning. Oh, Hayashi's ward has a medical condition that means he needs to remain cloaked. Inoichi's eyes suddenly widened and, making sure that Choza didn't see what he was doing, he held up 4 fingers. Shikaka nodded and Inoichi whistled. Him. Whoa. Choza looked at them both suspiciously. Alright, what did I miss? Having a daughter aiming for the title of Gossip Queen of Konoha. Inoichi shot back. I may not be up to Shikaka's level of intelligence, but I know how to put a few facts together myself. Choza looked at them both suspiciously and Inoichi sighed. Alright, let's head to the tower and get you into the secret too. You coming, Shika? A snore was his answer and Inoichi sighed. Lazy bum. Ino stared in shock at her father for a long moment, then her mind seemed to restart. Ruto's coming to the next clan party? Why? He's creepy. Inoichi sighed. He will be coming with Hayashi-sama, Hitomi-san, Hinata, Hanabi and Niji. Hinata's coming? Ino chirped. She's okay, she isn't competition. For what? Inoichi asked before he could stop himself and Ino rolled her eyes. For Sasuke-kun, of course. Ino sighed, obviously irritated at the incredible denseness of her father. I mean, sure, she likes Ruto, which is kind of freaky, but at least she isn't after the hunk of the class. Inoichi held back a sigh as his daughter continued to wax lyrical about the many real and imagined attributes of the Uchiha boy. Part of him wondered if he could get Ino romantically interested in Choji instead. The boy was one of the nicest people he knew, after all. And that's why he's the best. Ino finished triumphantly and Inoichi dragged his attention back to the conversation. That's nice, Ino. He murmured, making another note to go over the signs of irrational obsession with her. Again. So, you've invited Roto. You're playing a long game. Shikamaru commented as he moved one of his lances on the board before him. The payoff will be worth it. Shikako replied, placing a piece to counter the incipient assault his son had planned. Shikamaru grunted in irritation at having his ploy foiled so quickly. So? Shikako continued as he watched to see what his son would come up with. Your analysis? Shikamaru moved one of his horses and leaned back slightly. Risks, minimal. Effort, low to medium, payoff ranging from minimal to maximum depending on various factors. Most obvious factor, can Hayashi Hyuga cope with one of our gatherings? When the three clans get together, we don't stand on ceremony like the Hyuga do. If he can't, it could destroy the alliance before it can settle. I've already talked to Hayashi about it. Shikamaru nodded, looking over the board in an attempt to divine his father's strategy. I assume that you are both trying to make this alliance work? Shikako nodded as Shikamaru moved his silver general. Nice move. Yes, we can both see the goal we are working towards. Shikamaru nodded, then scowled as his father dropped a lance onto the board in just the right place to threaten his defense. Hinata and Roto are coming? Choji repeated, looking at his father. That's good, I like them. They don't make fun of me like some of the others do. Hinata really likes cinnamon rolls and Roto loves ramen. He eats it at Shiraka's at least once a week. Choza nodded, making a mental note to consider hiring Tucci and his daughter to help with the food preparation for a future gathering if Roto became a regular guest. Anything else I should know? Choji frowned in thought for several moments, then he shook his head. Only that he somehow eats through his mask. Ino almost went mad trying to work that one out. Choza snorted in amusement. Sounds like an Jonin trick. I think it was invented by Hatake Kakashi. He always wears a mask and uses a genjutsu to hide when he drops it. When Ino touched it, it was solid. Choza raised his eyebrows at that. Really? Sounds like a proper ANBU trick. They perch their masks on their foreheads ready to drop with a slight twitch. It's hidden by the genjutsu. Choji mused. I wonder if Ino has found out about that trick yet. Will you tell her? Choji shook his head. Nah, it's fun watching her get all worked up. Providing she isn't getting worked up at me, that is. I'm just surprised one of her relatives hasn't told her about it. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.